Let's talk about a really powerful metaphor that can honestly transform pretty much any group or organization you're a part of. It's the difference between being in a rowboat or being in a sailboat. One is all about exhausting human effort, and the other is about learning to catch the wind. It's the journey from total burnout to real adventure.
Right off the bat, you can see the huge contrast here. The rowboat organization, well, it runs on pure, grinding human effort. The experience is toil, it leads straight to burnout. And it's almost always driven by this mindset of scarcity. The fear that there's just never enough time, money, or people. But the sailboat organization, it learns to catch the wind. Its power comes from a guiding purpose, and the experience is one of energy and adventure. It operates from a totally different place, a mindset of abundance.
So the big question is, how do you make that shift? How do you get out of the rowboat and into the sailboat? Well, it all starts with setting the right course. Before you can even think about raising the sails, you have to adopt a few foundational mindsets that will completely change how you see the journey ahead. The first one is this idea called sanctified imagination. Now, this is not about daydreaming or fantasy, not at all. It's this disciplined, creative ability to look at your current situation, hold it right up next to your core mission, and then imagine real, practical ways to bridge that gap. It's that mental leap from just talking about your principles to actually living them out in the real world. Here's a perfect example. Back in the mid-'80s, Clifton Church in Atlanta felt this call to help the homeless. Now get this, they had only 30 members. They met in a tiny house. They had zero special funding. By any worldly logic, they had nothing to work with. But they used their sanctified imagination to see what could be, and with those limited resources, they created the very first night shelter for the homeless in the entire city of Atlanta. Incredible. And this is why it's so crucial. Without that kind of imagination, organizations just stagnate. There's this sense of just being stuck. When we can't imagine a new way forward, all the energy just drains away. We end up just maintaining what we've always done instead of building a real future. Okay, so let's build on that. The next mindset shift requires us to radically redefine what we even mean when we say success. The world tells us success is being big, profitable, and winning. It's about avoiding failure no matter what. It's about protecting and caring for your assets. But sailboat success, it's completely different. It's defined by one thing: faithfulness to the mission. It actually requires a willingness to take risks, and yep, even to fail sometimes, in pursuit of that mission. It's not about hoarding what you have, it's about investing it all. And all of this flows from the third mindset, which is creating a culture of abundance. You see, a scarcity mindset, that fear that resources are limited, it makes us hold on tightly to everything we have. But a culture of abundance is built on trust. It's a belief that there is enough, and that belief is what frees people up to be truly generous. The ancient practice of the tithe, or giving 10%, is held up as this powerful countercultural leap of faith that helps shift us from that scarcity thinking to one of abundance. Okay, so with those mindsets locked in as our foundation, the focus now has to shift to action. It's not enough to just think differently, we have to act differently and do it together. This is all about the communal practices that actually let us work the sails and catch that wind. I'm sure many of us recognize this picture all too well. It's the classic 80-20 problem, and it is the hallmark of a rowboat organization. You've got a small, exhausted 20% of the people doing 80% of all the work, while the other 80% have kind of become passive consumers. You know it, you've seen it, and it is a guaranteed recipe for burnout. So the sailboat solution isn't to just try and guilt more people into filling empty job slots. It's a much more fundamental shift. It's about actively discovering the unique gifts and talents of every single member and then shaping the mission around the team you actually have. So instead of forcing people into jobs, you unleash their passion. Another key practice is learning to rise above our own self-interest for the sake of the mission. A classic and sometimes painful example of failing to do this is what's known as the worship wars in churches. These fights over music style are almost always battles of personal preference, not core principles. And then you get a breakthrough moment. This quote. This is from an older church member who was talking about a new contemporary service that he personally just did not like. And he said, "I hate that kind of music, but if doing this might help us reach young people, I am all for it." Wow. That single statement shifted the entire focus from what I want to what is our mission. That right there is working the sails together.
Of course, the journey isn't always smooth sailing, right? Every organization is going to face storms and those long, quiet periods of calm. So, this next set of practices is all about building the resilience and the deep intimacy you need to navigate whatever comes your way.
At the absolute heart of this resilience is a very specific kind of love called agape. And this isn't just about liking people or being friendly. It's described as a supernatural, in spite of love. It's the commitment to move beyond just being polite and surface level and to truly accept people for who they are. And that is the foundation for any real community and service. Talk about a storm. On Christmas Eve, Hemphill Church burned completely to the ground. Now, for this shrinking congregation, it really felt like the end, a total disaster. But because they had built a resilient community, they were somehow able to see this tragedy not as a dead end, but as a path to an entirely new future. So how did they do that? How do you see a fire as an opportunity? Their resilience came from three core beliefs. First, that good can be brought out of literally any situation. Second, that our weaknesses, not just our strengths, can be used for a greater purpose. And third, the simple but really profound belief that our job is not to lead, but to follow. These principles are what turn trials into opportunities. So let's wrap this all up with a final thought for the journey ahead. Because becoming a sailboat organization, well, it isn't a one-time fix. It's a commitment to an ongoing voyage. If you take just one thing away today, let it be this. This is that new definition of success we talked about. It is not about having a perfect record or avoiding every mistake. True success, the kind that energizes and actually sustains a group, is simply faithfulness to the mission day in and day out. And that leaves all of us with this final, powerful question to reflect on. Moving from a rowboat to a sailboat really means discovering your unique calling. So the question for each of us, in whatever organization we're a part of, is this. What is beside your name on the to-do list? What is that specific mission you are called to sail towards?